And our first presentation this morning is about what we might in the past have called television, but we'll probably call something like visual content more accurately these days. The presentation is titled, I Want My EPG, and it's from the Managing Director of Channel Sculptor, someone who I guess is known to many of you in the room, Nick Grande, a 20-year career in television. Started off in the UK working there, did a lot of work with MTV and their digital channels, then moved to, or turned his attention to this region in the late 90s with Showtime, as it was called then, and was instrumental in moving Showtime from a London-based company to being a Dubai-based organization. He helped launch MTV Arabia, and then about 5 years ago, launched his own consultancy, Channel Sculptor. As I say, the topic of his presentation is I Want My EPG. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the stage Nick Grande.
Many thanks, Richard, for the introduction. I'm sorry I didn't have Dire Straits ready for me coming up here. Just to start off, every year we aim to publish a white paper around the CabSat period. Last year we put a paper out on the importance of encryption in relation to high-definition television and the role it can play in improving the penetration of high def in the market. This year, I wanted to turn attention to an old story, something we're all very familiar with, but something which somehow doesn't get the attention it deserves. And back when I was at Showtime, as Richard was alluding to before, I was actually in charge of the EPG element of the business. We were always looking for new means of generating revenue, and in fact we sold EPG services at that time. And back then we were the only credible source of EPG data. And surprisingly today there really aren't that many more sources of EPG data to choose from. So I think if we look at what's happening at the moment, we're all focused on 4K, we're focused on multi-screen, we're focused on OTT services, all these wonderful new things, but actually from a viewer's point of view, it's shocking that there's so little industry focus on such a fundamental and basic problem, which is we don't have any EPG services. And so my intention really with this white paper and with this introduction today is to firmly establish EPG on the 2014 agenda. This isn't just for you guys, for broadcasters, it's also for the benefit of the IPTV networks, for the set-top box manufacturers who at the moment have difficulty differentiating their products, and most importantly for the TV viewers themselves. I mean, EPG in the end creates value for everybody. So, I mean, we're all familiar with the concept of big data, and I think it's important to understand why EPG creates value for broadcasters, for example. I mean, if you have data, your product is more searchable, and by being more searchable, it becomes more discoverable, and that in turn introduces more audience to your product. So, and obviously audience, whether you're in a subscription business or in an advertising business, is what you're seeking. So by creating searchability for your product through more data about your product, you're generating value for your product. And that becomes even more the case in this world of smartphones and tablets that we're in now, because EPG is making its way across so many different platforms, not simply the set-top box that we're familiar with. I mean, it's surprising to me that, I mean, in the course of just putting the research together for this paper, that EPG has been around for almost 25 years. So there was a 14-day EPG service available in the US as early as 1990. And what's more, you could record onto your video cassette recorder directly from that EPG with one click. I mean, it's quite staggering to think that almost 25 years on, there's still no equivalent service in the Middle East and North Africa. I mean, around the world, detailed listings are ubiquitous, but not only that, synopses, artwork, video, cast lists, you name it. It's all standard on your TV service. And beyond that, we see those services going onto smartphones, so you can use your smartphone as a remote control. You can look at the EPG regardless of where you are. And perhaps most interestingly, you have services like Zbox, which is a picture of here, where you're integrating your EPG service with social media and allows much more of a sense of popularity of programming, much more engagement for the users. At the same time, it gives you new tools for audience measurement, recommendations, and so forth, and even advertising. So the tool that EPG represents is a starting point. This idea of having a map of what you're going to be broadcasting on your linear channel is so valuable in other ways. And of course, for anyone who has a free-to-air set-top box at their home, looking at Nilesat or Arabsat, pretty much this is what you're getting. So it's not like nothing's ever been done before in this. I mean, it's been 10 years. In fact, when I left MTV Arabia to set up the business, one of the key areas I was looking to establish some revenues in was in this area of EPG. And I was working closely with telcos at the time, looking at opportunities to create value for them. And yet, and I know I wasn't alone in this space, there were other individuals, some of whom are in this room, who were working on similar propositions. None of them quite came to pass, and there were a number of reasons for that. Every year, there's more and more channels, so the problem becomes even more difficult to crack. I was talking actually this morning to the CEO of What's on India, who are the major EPG aggregator for South Asia, and in fact have a presence in the Middle East as well, about their experience of EPG in the Middle East versus their market, for example, their core market of India. And Atul cited some numbers for me. I mean, basically, within India, there are about 750 free-to-air channels, similar to the Middle East, in fact. And of those, he estimates about 300 channels provide high-quality listings data. Another 350 provide what he described as satisfactory listings data. And then 100 or so basically give him nothing of any value at all. If you compare that with his experience so far in MENA, bearing in mind that Shufi TV, the company that was acquired, has been working on listings in MENA since 2006, it's quite interesting to note that 50 free-to-air channels provide good quality listings data, maybe another 50 provide adequate listings data, and the remaining 650 basically don't provide anything at all. So what's going wrong? Well, it's not simply that people are lazy. I think, there's a temptation to think, well, people don't really want to bother, and, it's the case of lack of discipline and too much fragmentation. Surely those might be factors in some cases, but there are some structural issues that cause this problem as well. The most basic one is that there isn't a set-top box platform here in the region of any scale. So if we look at where EPG first started in the US, first became strong in Europe and the UK, these are countries where there was a pay TV platform that had its own set-top box, was able to control what was on it and create some degree of uniformity of infrastructure. So without that, with a less than 6% pay TV penetration, it's very hard to create a platform. The next problem is that the set-top boxes themselves in the region are extremely low cost, more so than ever. We did some work a couple of years ago with a set-top box distribution company here in the region, and I was shocked to understand that they were downgrading the memory capacity of their boxes from 1 meg to 512K because it was going to save them 30 cents a unit. You'd think, well, whoever heard of 512K in anything these days? It's quite an extraordinary number to hear that a new product is being shipped with that level of capacity and processing power. And the reason is simple, is the set-top box market used to be a very lucrative, profitable industry. Multiple, thousands or millions of boxes being shipped every year by distributors. each one with high profit margins. Now they're looking at pennies on the dollar on each unit. So that affects, obviously, the quality and the consistency of the EPG software included in the box. The next problem is that there are very few entities that have been able to consolidate in any way the data. So I mentioned what's on India. A number of the IPTV operators have established their own EPG aggregation services for their own markets. But again, as yet, there hasn't really been a game-changing aggregation platform. And we're talking about broadcasters from over 20 countries. It's a difficult thing to get on the phone to coordinate with so many different broadcasters, especially when you've got a problem where, as we say, sort of 80 to 90% of them aren't producing anything of value at all. So you've got a structural issue there. And of course, the net result is the broadcasters say, well, is there any point? Because I know that my EPG is not going to get published on any boxes. IPTV is still relatively low in the market. So I can publish all this data, but what's the benefit to me? It means resource, time, and no real effort, no real gain for my efforts. Now, what I'm proposing really, and the basic premise of the white paper, is that we need to turn this argument on its head. If MENA broadcasters systematically produce EPG listings and make them widely available, that will solve this problem. But the solution has to start with the broadcasters themselves. They have to understand the value to them, not only to other entities, but specifically to them, of properly managing this data, exhaustively seeking out as much content relating to their content as they can, whether it's synopses or artwork or promo videos or even audience preferences and so forth. This is all valuable. It has a dollar value associated with it. This, in turn, from a set-top box manufacturer, means those manufacturers or distributors that can actually produce a product that's capable of storing and reproducing this data will have a margin opportunity over their competitors. Suddenly, consumers will choose that box over the other because it has good quality listings embedded in it and good quality metadata to support those listings. Obviously, the channels benefit from this because suddenly you've got searchability. We talked about this already, and the ability to actually get your programming front and center. Viewers start to look for your product. People start to recognize your programs, and they associate your programs with your channel. Viewers obviously benefit themselves because for the first time, they've not only got channel genres, they've got programming information. They actually get to see what the real options are. So the default position is no longer 2 or 3 channels. They can be looking at 15 or 20 channels across multiple genres. The IPTV players don't lose out either. Suddenly, they don't have to hire all those staff to go chasing after broadcasters. They can actually benefit from data which is coming through in a systematic way. And the pay TV platforms similarly. So let's just overcome the misconceptions. I mean, these are quotes that I've heard from the industry in terms of the kind of reasons why EPG is not put in a priority. Nobody sees them. It's free advertising. Even if nothing else is done, none of these other factors that I mentioned happen, the fact that you have listings data means you have data which is publishable, whether it's in print form or any form. Having that degree of control over your asset, the ability to monetize it or market it in new ways, certainly on the IPTV platforms as a starting point. The other common argument is that EPG is only relevant if you happen to be a movie channel or a general entertainment channel. If you're into news, if you're into religion or into music or sports, then what's the point of having EPG? Well, again, there is a point. You're competing in a very competitive space. If we take news as an example, there are upwards of 50 news channels in this region now. And the news content, it's up to that channel to actually know what's being broadcast at what time and who the presenters are and what they're going to be talking about in terms of genres of subject matter in order to make that more engaging from an audience's point of view. So what does it take to do this? First, automation. So within within the broadcaster, I talk about automation, and of course within this there is the discipline element as well. It's all very well having a great a channel management system and having a good automation system which is integrated into XML file exports and all these kind of things. But if you don't have a programming team which is actually willing to commit programming ahead of schedule, 2 weeks, 4 weeks ahead of schedule, know what's going to be in the listings and stick to it, and have a management team that commit to providing that obviously everything else falls apart. But once you've established that basic discipline, having the tools to allow it to happen without masses of resources being thrown at it is a big factor. There has to be some staff element that are associated. I think if you talk to the service providers, they'll say there should be dedicated staff. I think at the very least, your programming staff should recognize that this is a priority, and they should have a direct relationship either with the IPTV platforms or at least with someone who deals with them. And people should be thinking about the metadata, not simply the listings, but what other data should we be collecting when we put this asset into our system, so that the way that assets are managed within the broadcaster allows for metadata. And so there is a certain discipline across all these areas. And I realize that a lot of the people in this room are not from broadcasters, they're from manufacturers and solution providers. And I think this kind of challenge actually has potential benefits to everybody, whether they're in the automation sector or in the middleware or whatever you happen to be in. There are all sorts of opportunities that come out of publishing and maintaining good EPG and listing services. Now, from my point of view, probably the most significant beneficiaries of this approach would be what I would describe as the up-and-coming broadcasters. Obviously, if you're looking at NBC, NBC will always, they do publish good quality listings, but even if they didn't, they already have the brand power to attract audiences. But for the middle-tier broadcasters, this is the best way to get noticed. And so for any one of, I'd say, the 200 or so middle-tier broadcasters that have the resources and the desire and the discipline to improve, then this is a key area for improvement. And this is an area that we'll be focusing as a business to try and help those broadcasters to make this step. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nick, for those insights, and I'm sure Nick will be happy to answer questions or have follow-up conversations over lunch a little bit later today.